I've spoken to many therapists about peer support. I say, oh, I'm a peer support person. They say, oh, what's that?
Oh,
and
wow.
I'm like, pardon me. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why don't you know about this?
On the mic with us today is Lindsay Civiero, Canadian certified peer support specialist and founder of Peer Support Therapy.
Sometimes you have to be on quite the journey before you end up in peer support, which is something I'm trying to change, because people heard, well, have you talked to your therapist? Have you, did you see your doctor? These are the questions people ask. And the answer could be yes and yes. And I still didn't get what I was looking for.
Lindsay is on a mission to reduce the shame and stigma surrounding talking about mental health.
Educating ourselves is the most important thing to do. So the first thing is, it's okay to ask. It's okay to say, are you having thoughts of suicide? That will not trigger someone to feel more suicidal or suicidal if they weren't already.
Lindsay is on the mic with us today to tell us her transformative story and give us advice on how to offer healing to those struggling to make sense of deep loss, pain, and tragedy.
Grief looks a lot like this. Grief recovery is big squiggly lines that go back and forth and up and down and back and over. And when you think you're rising up, there's a dip. And then when you think you're heading forward, you go back. And
I'm your host, Ina Korobkina, founder of Jewel Branding Studios and creator of the Business in Style fashion course for entrepreneurs. And
I'm Ingrid J. Monday, aka Ms. Monday, a photographer and filmmaker and the author of the book, The Secrets of Becoming a Boss Bitch with a Heart of Gold.
Welcome to another episode of the Rise Up and Fix It podcast.
Hi, Lindsay.
hello.
Oh, it's an honor to have you on our show today. Thank you so much for coming to chat with us. People like you who have dedicated their life to helping others and have been through tough times are truly incredible. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Your work is very important. And during our recent phone conversation in prep for this podcast, we delved into your past and we learned on the phone with you that you have experienced some trauma in your life and that has propelled you into the field. We believe that our stories can heal. And through our stories, I'd love for our listeners to hear yours. Thank you for being on our show.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to share my story. Part of what brought me into peer support in the first place was really because I discovered the healing nature of peer support through my journey. I grew up in a household with, maybe a lot of difficulty. There's some trauma there, certainly some substance use disorders and mental illness. And throughout those years and then in subsequent adult relationships, I encountered a lot of the same things, and eventually sought peer support for myself. And so having peer support me through my journey for, I'm going to say, more than a decade, probably 15 years. I'm not going to age myself and tell you it's more than that, but I sought it out for myself, and I found it to be the most healing, and I have tons of experience in various forms of therapy, and I do work hard to keep myself well, but nothing really holds a candle to peer support. The impact it had in my life, particularly after a lot of tragedy occurred in 2021 for me. I had a partner separated, which was really hard for my son and I. All in the same week, my mother died by suicide. So having had the peer support experience from the past, it was sort of a quick transition. I went right into seeking out peer support for myself and my brothers. We attended some really impactful groups after my mom's passing, and I don't know, a few months later on my journey, I just thought I need to learn more. I can't stop here. There's something I need to do with this. I need to find some purpose. And I ended up going back to school for addictions and mental health, and then for my Canadian peer support specialty. And now I work in the community. Worked in the hospital, and I have a private practice as well. And that's the journey that led me here. A whole lot of trauma, but a lot of hard work and recovery, and most importantly, the peer support aspect made it very clear to me that this is something that I needed to do, because it made such a difference.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for doing what you do.
For those of our listeners who are not familiar with what a peer support specialist is and does, can you please tell us how you work with people and how you help them?
Yes, absolutely. Peer support itself is a type of, I'm going to call it therapeutic support for those who have undergone some sort of trauma or a mental health issue, addiction, those sorts of things. And peer support is led by those who have already undergone their own recovery. So any peer support specialist, as a requirement to be a peer support person, you will have had your own lived experience with these things. And then you sort of return and support others on their journey, no matter where they are on their journey, whether they're well into their recovery or just starting out. Since you've been there before, you can really have a good understanding of what sort of stages they're at and what issues they may encounter. You help support them through that and prepare them for what's next. Sometimes people find it really difficult to share their stories, and on the contrary, I found it very healing, and it was a huge part of my recovery was to be able to talk about my experiences and share my experiences. So my mom's loss was shocking, but also not that shocking. She struggled a lot. And then in the subsequent months going through her things, I discovered a lot about her, actually. A lot of old trauma, childhood trauma, things that she never spoke about. And it was very apparent that she was this, and for the people that knew her, bubbly and beautiful and just biggest heart in the world. She was a nurse. She cared a lot for others, but suppressed everything that she had gone through. And she didn't talk about it, and she didn't tell her story. And it all started to make sense. And then over the next several months, I thought a lot about what led to that, and decided to learn everything I could about mental health.
I think you have so many questions when someone passes, right? So, I don't know.
When there's been a shocking loss.
Yeah.
Right? When a loss comes out of nowhere, if we're not prepared for it, if they're young, if they're struggling, if it's a mental health issue, if we don't really know, if this comes out of nowhere, we don't have time to prepare like we do when we lose our grandparents to old age. When you have a loss in your family, it could be as close or as 4 generations away, or 4 families away, it reverberates through everybody. And it is now your loss.
Yes.
So whatever they were experiencing, you're now experiencing.
Yeah.
And you're seeing it through whatever light or darkness they were seeing it through. Yeah. And for you, if it's shocking or if it's new or out of nowhere, maybe it's the first time. Yeah. It's the first time you're considering that this person's life is looking a way you didn't expect. Yeah. This happens with suicides, homicides, and overdose losses. And they are all, they never leave us. Yeah. And whatever feelings we end up with as a result, the questions sometimes seem bigger than the feelings.
Yeah.
Like the feelings are love and loss, right? And like, oh my goodness, how could this happen?
Yeah.
Because I had so much love for this person,
Mm-hmm.
or I cared for them. You know, if you lose
Yeah.
a friend, maybe I was so in love with them, but if you had care for someone, it's a human being, it's a life.
Yeah.
And when the loss comes, there's this absence. A really beautiful way that it was explained to me is that their absence is just as present as their presence.
Yes.
Okay, so when they're not there anymore, their absence is just as big.
Yeah.
Just as big as who they were, just as big as that place that they held when they were here. And the questions also are just as big. Why? What could we have done? Right? Because that's part of grief. There's this like, what ifs, and I'm going to rewrite. How many different ways could we have rewritten the story? Yeah. What would have prevented it? And we can't know.
Yeah,
we can't know, but we can honor their absence.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. You're such a shining, bright, like light. They usually say people, like you were saying about your mom, how she was such a bright light and you don't see it coming, right? You never know when someone's truly struggling. Like, how do you see the symptoms when they're so hidden? Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to. It's very hard to. And it's like you never really know until it's too late sometimes. And so it's important to check on each other.
Exactly. How do you encourage people to reach out for help when they need it? And how do you, what signs should we be looking for when someone's struggling?
That's a good question. By the time they're finding me, they're already are reaching out for help. They've gone through the system. They're maybe they've gone through the hospital. Maybe they've joined a community support group at that point, and that's where they're seeing me. So typically, by the time they're getting to me, it's quite apparent that they're having difficulties that they can't handle on their own. But really just checking on your friends, they say check on your okay friends, because maybe they're not. So, if you have a minute, do it. But truthfully, I think the most important thing is to make sure we're putting our own oxygen mask on first. Because if we're going on about looking to make sure everybody else around us is okay, are we really taking care of ourselves? Because it is up to us to reach out for help. It's up to us to recognize, I'm not doing so well. Maybe there's something out there that I don't know about. And sometimes you have to be on quite the journey before you end up in peer support, which is something I'm trying to change, because people heard, well, have you talked to your therapist? Have you, did you see your doctor? These are the questions people ask. And the answer could be yes and yes. And I still didn't get what I was looking for, or I still didn't get the support I needed. And that is where peer support makes such a huge difference.
Yeah. So, you must have seen so many transformative stories, and so you see the benefits of peer support. Can you share a particular story that really stands out about the power of the transformative power?
There are some people that I have encountered in my work who come to me and they say, like, I have been in and out of the hospital. I have been in therapy for 10 years. I've been struggling with these substances for this long, and my folks are supportive. Like, I've got all these things, but it's not cutting it. But doing some classes with me or doing some one-on-ones with a peer support person, where you find that connection, where someone understands you and can offer up just little tidbits of information, personal stories of success. Give it a try. You don't have to. It may work for you. It may not work for you. And then they come back and go, oh my gosh, what a difference that made for me. Like, I just didn't feel heard before, or I wasn't able to speak without feeling judged until I saw a peer mentor. or a peer support specialist. Because even going to your doctor, they're sitting there and they've got their credentials and their education and their scripts and their prescriptions to recovery. But if they haven't gone through it themselves, it's not from a lived experience standpoint. So until you have somebody go, hey, I recovered, I did it. I promise you can do it. I know you can do it. I believe you can do it.
Yeah.
Because I did it and I know people who've done it and it's possible. And if you don't believe that, then you won't. You have to believe it. And until you meet someone who's done it, who believes it wholeheartedly,
Yeah.
it's hard to go on without that hope. You need that hope.
So what are the stages? You experience the trauma. I'm sure there's like a grieving period. And what do you think is like the natural stage of the healing process? Like how long can it take someone to go, feel normal again?
Yeah, and at what stage is best for them to come to you?
Yeah, and that too.
These are really good questions. I want to be careful about stages and trauma, because when we're talking about trauma, we're talking about grief. We're talking about the aftermath of something that has occurred.
Yeah.
We're talking about the wound that exists as a result of an occurrence.
Yeah.
And that occurrence may never happen again, but you still have that wound, right? You still have that hole or that worry or that fear. And grief, I usually carry around a little notepad and I draw pictures for people, but grief looks a lot like this. Grief recovery is big squiggly lines that go back and forth and up and down and back and over. And when you think you're rising up, there's a dip. And then when you think you're heading forward, you go back. And it's a wild ride. It's a bit of a roller coaster. And I don't know that actually ever stops. Maybe the dips become lower and the setbacks become shorter. But if something happens again that reminds you of your initial trauma, the wound can open back up. Yeah. And it needs to be attended to. Just like a cut on your leg or, a virus or an infection or something, it needs to be treated. And so the best time to come to me is the whole time. Truthfully, and as needed. And so when I am seeing people, I'm seeing them initially. I give them sort of a longer session. I get as much feedback as I can, as much background as I can, and then I step away and gather as many resources as I can, like free resources, community resources, things they haven't heard about, things they can do on their own for free or from the comfort of their home or their phone or whatever. And then come back and create a plan. We sort of create a plan together. And that's the first step. After that, it's sort of, how are you on the plan? Are we on the right track? What do you need? And part of my support might be encouraging them to seek a particular type of therapy and check in with me, how it's going. Is it the right one for you? If not, here was my experience and here's what I tried instead. And so we don't want people to be seeing me forever, but certainly while they're healing, they'll know. They know when it's time when they've got it. And often I come back and I hear like, do you want to see, should I see you again next week? And they're like, I think I'm okay. And it's like, yay. And we both have a celebration. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, I'm like, little bump up, please. Can I just get a top up on my support? I want some feedback on where I'm going and if it feels like the right direction. And I just support people through wherever they're at, because I've been through all of the stages and back again. So,
that's so...
Oh,
the whole ride anyway.
It's so wonderful that you do that. There's so many people that need that support, and grieving can be a lonely process.
Yes.
And it, like you said, it's a wound, and you just want to go hide and just grieve on your own, but we heal through stories. As we learned in season 2, Michelle Rosetta came to talk to us, and she talked about the oral frequency and healing through stories. And we also had Natalie Madramudo on the mic with us for season 2, and she left an abusive relationship, and she mentioned that her journey would have been so much smoother and the healing process would have been faster, and she would have been able to move on quicker if she had the support system.
Yep.
Are you familiar with any peer support specialists that deal with women who are leaving abusive situations, or is that something you can help women with as well?
Yes, that is actually, I unfortunately have quite a bit of lived experience with this.
Okay.
I definitely have, I have my own experiences, right? Some people, once they hear my experience, they may not be ready to do what I did. I'm a, behind the scenes, get ready to pack your things and set yourself up and go quietly. But that's not always possible. That's not always the case. And in those situations, I try to support people as best I can, and then connect them with other specific resources that may support them, be it shelters or communities that support women who are getting out of abusive relationships. I have friends who do a lot of charity work, gathering materials and items and helping to prepare women for what's to come. But I absolutely, I would spend a lot of my time supporting women through this if possible. It's just unfortunate that's
out there.
such a necessity. Yes.
I can imagine it can be overwhelming because there's so many emotions and so many triggers. And you said it was a healing process for you to share your story, but I imagine certain parts of telling your story and sharing it could be also triggering. Do you find moments where you have to like take a break and just continue on your healing journey?
And what do you do to what are your healing techniques? Right.
So to answer the first question, definitely there have been times where I'm feeling like, oh my goodness, I'm emotionally, I don't even want to say overwhelmed, maybe like invested, right? So someone's telling me their story and I think, oh my gosh, I know this inside and out, and I'm on this side of it and you're way over here. And I just want to hug you and grab you and bring you over to this side. But people have to go through, understanding, realizing that there are alternatives to the way that they've been living, and before they can make those steps. So feeling compelled to like heal people faster is something that happens, especially when their issue hits home for me. Right. So if I'm talking to people who've lost someone to suicide, if I'm talking to people who have a partner, who are leaving a relationship and they love their partner dearly, but they're struggling with substance use issue and they're not getting the help they need for it. Encouraging people to separate themselves from their loved one's struggle is a very difficult thing to do. And it's so necessary for both people because their loved one won't heal either if you're still around. And so there's these complex, there's a lot of complexity with mental health healing, substance use healing. If you're in relationships, they can end up being codependent, right? You've got, your one person is picking up after your addict, or your addict is going like, I'm really feeling hopeful today, and I know I'm gonna change, and there's these like up and downs, and until you sort of really step back and heal yourselves individually, that you can't really come back together as whole healed people and move forward together. So there's a lot of really independent healing that needs to be done. And so getting that point across to people it's hard, but it's easy through stories. It's easier through stories, really. Like if you can't tell somebody, here's what happened and here's how it went, good and bad, right? They need to know how many times you tried that and it didn't work. for them to go, oh, really? Are you sure? And that's what you get. So some of those struggles people have that I can really, really relate to, those are the ones where I just want to get in and help them heal faster. So to come home at the end of the day and know, we're not there yet, that's when it's time for me to, this isn't about me. And what is about me that came up today? And how do I treat that? And that's when I go, okay, I'm going to write this out. So some of my steps, to answer your other question, some of my steps are, I'm going to write this down. I'll pull out my journal. And I have people say, I hate journaling. And I say, okay, I'll find you a digital platform to do it with, and you're going to dictate into the phone. And they go, okay, I can do that. So some part of my job is just helping people find alternatives that work for them. You know, if you hand someone a notebook and a pen and they hate writing, it's not going to work for them. So you have to go, okay, all right, what will you do? What do you need to do? How can I help you get there? And so I write. And if I don't feel like writing it down, I'll do my digital journal it out. I do those things when I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed, and also when I'm trying something new. So I'm trying to walk every day, or I'm trying to pardon me, I'm trying to make my lunch every day. You know, I don't want to eat out every day, and I want to do this thing, and it's just like a healthy lifestyle change. I'm going to journal about how that went for my first week or two of doing it. I'm going to see what road bumps I hit. I'm going to see, did I love myself for that, or just hate myself for getting up that extra 20 minutes early? Or was I mad that I wasn't prepared enough to get all my groceries for the week? Am I kicking myself for trying this? If I am, it's not the thing. This isn't the thing for me. And so even just 5 or 6 days of journaling, you can really look back and go, take a good assessment of whether what you're doing is helping or not. And that's something I do often. And then I change it up if it's no good.
It's like a conversation with yourself. We had Juan Gray on the first episode of season 2. He talked about journaling, and it's this conversation with yourself and reflections, and you get epiphanies and realizations and a clear path, clarity in life.
Clarity for sure, yeah. Because otherwise you've got all these, it's almost like a pile of ideas and thoughts and things that occurred. And then once you write them down, all of a sudden it's organized. And the page is now just, we're down to a paragraph. There we go.
Nice.
It cleans up mental space.
For sure.
Which is really important.
Gosh, like, I believe life is truly amazing, and we are all so lucky to be alive. But for some people, it's hard to view life that way, especially when you have had a traumatic experience happen to you. With all these warning signs, what are things that parents can look for in teens, and how can we help prevent? What are things that you think that they should look out for?
I want to share first that people often are afraid to ask direct questions about mental illness, thoughts of suicide, and things like that, because people are afraid. They're afraid to talk about it because we haven't talked about it. We're just starting to talk about this in the last, decade.
Yeah.
It's just becoming more, more accepted. Everybody's working really hard to, reduce the shame and the stigma associated with mental illness, but it is still super, super prevalent. It's everywhere. And educating ourselves is the most important thing to do. So the first thing is, it's okay to ask. It's okay to say, are you having thoughts of suicide? That will not trigger someone to feel more suicidal or suicidal if they weren't already. Okay, so that's an important thing to know. It is okay to ask that direct question. Do ask that direct question. Sometimes the kids will say yes, and then it's time to ask for help. There are resources for youth in the community, in the GTA and Peel and everywhere. Canadian Mental Health Association has resources in every city, and they have programs. Education for caregivers. So if your kid is unwilling and they're not opening up, you can go learn about this. You can go and join a support group. You can find a peer support person to help you along the way. So you absolutely should ask the direct questions. You absolutely should find support for yourself, and connection is so important. So if you're finding your child or your, relative or your partner, your person, if people are withdrawing, do your best to create connection. And it's so much easier said than done. So much easier said than done. But, I'm here for you. I am here to support you. I will take you wherever you need to go. And it is okay to ask for help. And you are not in trouble and there's nothing wrong with you. These are important messages. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with you. And also to know that people who have lost someone in this way, by the time this occurs, the individual's not in their right mind. It's not their something else is at the wheel. So I think it's important to know that, because I don't want people to feel like, oh shoot, I didn't ask. I didn't ask the direct question, and then we've had this loss. It oftentimes the person themselves is not in control at that time. And there may have been nothing we could do to stop it. But what we can do is talk about it, support each other through it, and reduce the shame and reduce the stigma about discussing our mental health. Get it in the schools. I would like to see talks about peer support in every school, right? There's stuff out there that you don't know about. I've spoken to many therapists about peer support. I say, I'm a peer support person. They say, oh, what's that?
Oh,
and I'm like, pardon me. And I'm like, why don't you know about this? And it drives me crazy. And something's missing about how we're talking about this, or that we're not talking about this, and that we're not talking about it early enough.
For sure. Yeah. I saw somewhere the fact that in 2017, depression was the #1 disease worldwide, and I'm sure it still is. And now we're dealing with social media, and there's a lot of issues that are brought up with that, with teens that are not feeling confident or feeling isolated and misunderstood. And kind of, I guess social media adds fuel to the fire, because you're seeing images that might not be empowering, and that adds to it. I want to add something or touch upon something. Correct me if I am wrong, but with depression and mental health issues, is it true to believe that it's the stories that we tell ourselves, and those stories are formed when we're very young, where potentially we're not treated as precious and worthy, and we continue through life believing those stories even though they're not true at all? And then it's catching those stories and building experiences for ourselves within something like a peer support with the help of a peer support specialist or a group, where you start being treated as worthy, and it's almost like a mirror. The person that you're dealing with mirrors back to you your worth, and that you belong and you're loved. When you work with clients, do you feel that that's the effect that it's having?
So part of what makes me good at my job is that through the stories people are telling me, I can see what you're talking about, which is core beliefs. You're really talking about core beliefs, and those are formed. They're formed early, but you can form them as you grow, with repeated experiences or repeated behaviors can definitely form how you see yourself, good or bad. And some of the core beliefs that we grow up with, we don't even know we've done it. It's quite subconscious. It's all very, very programmed at the subconscious level, and actually needs to be addressed there too. And so it's very difficult to think our way out of these core beliefs, because they're so ingrained and they're so present in our subconscious. Depression has depression could be a result of a life that is led, based on these negative core beliefs. But it's also a chemical. Right. So there's two different things going on here. I think it's important to be seen by a psychiatrist if we're not sure what exactly is going on, because our core beliefs can lead us to all kinds of horrible life-changing things like attachment problems. You could encounter relationships where your core beliefs are being reinforced, right? I'm not good enough, or I can't do this, or nobody loves me, or whatever. And you'll find people that reinforce that. You'll just naturally do it subconsciously. That's who you'll attract, and that's who you'll find. Depression is a different beast. It can come and get you whether you have positive core beliefs or not. So it's important to talk about those things and differentiate them and treat them concurrently. They will, at the same time. If we dig into our core beliefs, make changes to how we feel about ourselves, then we have the power to take back those parts of our lives that we let go, or that we signed away or gave over to someone else, based on those negative beliefs. So I have a handy knack for going, I have a feeling this or that might be how you feel about yourself based on what you've told me. Does that resonate? Do you think that's true? And if it is, give me a few examples of how that's informing what you do every day. Okay, well, what if your core belief is this instead? How would you have showed up there? What would you have said here? What do we do next?
Can you give an example?
Sure. I was talking to somebody recently about their choice in partners. Okay, I always choose this partner, that partner, the wrong person, and now I'm just going to stay single because I don't trust anybody. Okay, I just don't trust anybody. Nobody's trustworthy because all of your encounters have been with somebody who isn't. That statement says very little about other people and everything about you. It's not that other people aren't trustworthy. You don't trust yourself to make the right choice.
Oh, wow.
That's, you don't believe in yourself that you can decipher a good person from a bad person. You don't believe in yourself enough to know, I know what's good and what's not. What's going to be good for me, what's not going to be good for me. When to say yes and when to walk away. I don't trust myself. And so then you start digging. Okay, what's your core belief that leads you not to trust yourself?
Wow. Yeah.
That's powerful. Well said. Yeah.
And then you set them on a journey to help them trust themselves and make positive or good choices and feel confident in moving on and making the right decisions, right? So
for sure. Or even finding, there's some therapists that specify in specific traumas and undoing and rewiring these beliefs. I might recommend that, and then set off my peer on this journey, and then they come back and go, okay, where are we now? Let's go from here. Wow.
Yeah, I've also noticed that it's also a journey of setting boundaries, clear boundaries, because part of that core belief and starting to feel like we're worthy and we deserve to be treated well is setting a boundary, so that when someone is not treating us with kindness and respect, it's saying, no, it's not okay, but with kindness, right? Have you noticed that with your clients?
It is one of the topics that I touch upon the most. Through my work in the community, I usually do groups where I do some sort of psychoeducation. I discuss communication skills, boundaries, attachment, peer support, stages of recovery. These are topics that educate people on. And boundaries is one of the biggest ones, and it's one of the ones we revisit the most. And the important thing about boundaries, I wouldn't say the most misunderstood thing about boundaries is that people don't know that the way to set a boundary, or what's an actual boundary versus a request, right? So boundaries are rules and limits that you set for yourself. They have nothing to do with anybody else. They have to do with what you are and you are not willing to accept. And there has to be a consequence attached to that boundary. Otherwise, it's not a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a if this, then that to make it a boundary. So I'd appreciate if you didn't call me drunk anymore after 2 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Please don't do that. Not a boundary, right? That's a request. But you can't call me. You calling me drunk after 2 a.m. is not good for me. And my phone is going to be on silent after 11 every night.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. And, you can say that with, kinder, I suppose, or you don't have to. My very best friend says no is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. Nope.
And that's good enough. We
Yeah.
don't have to dance around making sure everyone feels okay with our boundaries.
Yeah.
Those are their emotions to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
My emotions I've already dealt with. I've figured out what I'm willing to accept, and I've set a line. I'm managing my emotions. How someone else feels about them, not my problem.
Mm-hmm. I think I've always felt like setting boundaries harnesses respect within relationships too. Like I wrote a book called The Secrets of Becoming a Boss Bitch with a Heart of Gold, and a lot of it is about setting boundaries, and then also figuring out their boundaries and then working together through them. But I think if you're just too easy or too like, oh, everything goes, that's when you get trampled on. Right?
Oh, for sure.
So,
or if you don't know where your lines are. Some people's boundaries are guided by what someone told them they should or shouldn't. That's, oh, well, you shouldn't do that, or you should do that, or and so if you are not confident and clear about where your boundaries are coming from, your boundaries have to come from your values.
Yeah.
You have to be clear on your values in order to set effective boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to. You're absolutely right. If you're clear on your values and you walk into a situation, you say, these are my values and these are my boundaries. Everyone goes, oh my goodness, thank you for being so clear.
Yeah.
You take the hard work out of it for someone. They've already perfect. There it is on the table. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. The puzzle pieces are put together more, instead of because I find that especially when you're in the beginning of a relationship, there's a lot of learning that goes, and it's good to set those boundaries, because they might not work with the person that you're looking to date or who you're being with, and you might clash right away. And if you do, it's so much better to figure that out in the beginning of a relationship, right, than later. Right?
Absolutely.
But following your heart, too. So I mean, every scenario and every case is different, but I guess it depends on where you are at with the relationship, or what kind of relationship is it, and being, aware of that. Right?
For sure. And prioritizing the relationship with yourself.
Yes.
Right? So
yes.
if you make a decision, you walk away and you think, oh, I kind of regret that, or I don't feel good about that, you've actually compromised one of your own personal boundaries with yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's not a healthy practice, right?
Yeah.
You want to be like, nope, that was right for me. I made the right choice. Funny enough, even if our brain's not really connected to what's happening, or we're not consciously understanding what's wrong maybe with this situation, our gut is still firing. Okay, it is primal, and it is always there. It was there from the jump, and it's not going anywhere. So managing managing anxiety, or understanding what's anxiety versus what's reality, helpful. But your gut's going to tell you first there's something to pay attention to. And that is working, whether you're really in tune with yourself or not. So sometimes just starting there is a good way to reconnect with yourself after trauma, or after suppressed emotions, or after some difficulty, and just going, okay, I'm going to take my thinking out of it. I'm going to take my feeling out of it. What is my physical reaction telling me? What is my body telling me? This is, bottom up kind of repair, right? Whereas top down, you're thinking, okay, cognitively, does this make sense? Is this anxiety, or is this whatever? That's a real conscious way to approach an issue. But if that's not working that well, right? If we're like, I'm not sure, I'm having all these, cognitive distortions, I'm not sure, I'm thinking everything is black and white, or it's all or nothing, and and that's unrealistic. Okay, we're going to put that up. We're going to shush it for a minute. Go into your gut, right? Start feeling what's going on in your body. And it is a horribly painful practice for someone who's not very good at it. I am one of them. So I've had a really hard time. This has been part of my journey, is connecting with my physical being and listening to what my body is telling me, because my brain is just was making a mess of everything for a long time. So I had to really give my gut some power back. And
I love that.
Yeah, and we can do it. We just have to realize that we have another system that's working for us. And sometimes we just got to give it the wheel.
We love to add a touch of spirituality to our conversations. On your healing journey and the healing journey that you offer others that come to work with you, have you experienced any miracles or any, like, almost like the universe is talking to you, and like magical breakthroughs that come to mind?
I don't know. I have to think about that one, because I feel like it's going to be like me tooting my own horn, what I'm about to say. When someone comes to me and says, "Thank God you were here today. Thank God you were here today. You made such a difference today. And you only work, at this particular location 3 days a week, and I'm only here at this particular hour, and oh my goodness, I needed this today."
Oh, wow.
It's those moments where I'm like,
you changed somebody's life.
yeah, yes. And our paths crossed. It was meant to be. Those things, those are the things where I've got goosebumps. Those are the times where I think this was meant to happen. I was meant to be here. I was meant to go through all the horrible stuff I've gone through. I had to. If I didn't, I wouldn't have made this big of a difference. Yes, I've had loss. Sure, I've had trauma. Sure, I've had, toxic relationships, abuse, all kind, whatever. The list is long. It's really long. But it seems small in that moment when you make a difference to even 1, 2, 5 people. You think, oh, okay, that's it. My lemons, I made lemonade.
Yeah.
I, quenched somebody's thirst, and I made a huge difference today. And that's the sort of, I guess, the miracle of it is it was meant to be. These things are meant to be. And when you make a big difference, it feels outerworldly. It doesn't feel like, well, this was my conscious effort. I know what to do here. It's something else is at play for sure. That's what I feel.
You've taken your life experiences and are using them as fuel, as a source of inspiration, and giving it meaning.
Yes.
Because it could be so difficult when the grief is so overwhelming, when the loss is so overwhelming. It could be so hard to deal with, and it's when we find meaning in those moments that we're able to deal with it. Like Nichelle Loss, who's a friend of yours as well. Right. She found meaning in her story, and now she's changing the lives of so many. So if there's anyone out there who's really, really struggling and going through so much grief, definitely look for that peer support and try to find whatever meaning you can on your healing journey. Because
Absolutely.
People like Lindsay have done that, and they can speak from their experience that it's really, really helping.
It's very healing, and it really just comes from telling your story. Like, even if you just tell your story to one other person or a room full of people or someone who's going through something similar, it builds meaning. You can create meaning and purpose. Purpose is a huge component of recovery, mental health recovery, addiction recovery. Purpose is huge. Particularly with addictions, giving back, supporting other people who are trying to get sober, or working on their harm reduction, or just trying to live better lives, managing these things. The giving back is part of the healing. It's part of harm reduction, science-based healing. It's part of the 12 steps. That's a spiritual program. It is that aspect of recovery is in it's a requirement for healing for all of us.
Oh, what a beautiful note to wrap our episode on. That was beautifully said, very powerful. Thank you so much for everything that you do to help people heal. Thank you for sharing your journey, your story, and using your oral frequency as medicine. So we're really grateful that you took the time to be on our podcast today.
I'm grateful for you too.
Aww.
If you enjoyed our interview today, please share and like it.
And if you have a unique story on how you are creatively engaging with the world, we can help you share it in a multitude of different ways. We are experts in crafting stunning photos, videos, and compelling narratives. Our mission is to make you and your brand stand out.
Please visit our website, www.riseupandfixit.com, to learn more and to connect with us.